Hello, everyone. My name's Duncan White. I'm the managing editor of the International Fire and Safety Journal, and I'm delighted today to be joined on the podcast with Mike Newton, founder and CTO of the NetVu Group. Mike, how are you, my friend?
Very well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, it's exciting for me. As you know, I enjoy listening and hearing about all things new that are good in relation to safety. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And I've had the privilege of reading the notes beforehand, so I know what's coming. Mike, for our listeners, just tell them a little bit about your background and how we ended up here today talking about FireVu.
Well, I founded the original security business back in 1982, and that started with retail monitoring devices. Very quickly, it evolved into closed-circuit TV in the mid-80s, and in fact, we created the first time-domain video multiplexer, which was the forerunner of video recording as we see it today. When you see the stop-start multi-channel motion on something like Crime Watch, that's the technology that we originally pioneered. That carried on in the 90s to digital video recording and also transmission over the whatever digital lines existed at the time, which were pretty primitive by comparison to the internet today. And during the 90s, we got involved with fire detection. And in fact, it was the Swiss Air 111 crash coming out of Nova Scotia, where there was an uncontrolled fire somewhere above the cockpit, which no one really knows how or why to this day. We got involved at that time with Boeing in terms of a flame detection system to try and mitigate any future risks.
Well, Mike, that link up with Boeing must have been extremely exciting, albeit for a purpose that was created at the back of a disaster. But that must have given you a lot of openings.
The aerospace industry, unfortunately, moves very slowly, so it's a very long, slow process with them, and equally, that's also the case with the fire industry as well. 15 years, 20 years is new in the fire industry.
Yeah, exactly, and that's something that I'm sure we'll touch base on later in the podcast. Interesting for me to read that you're a petrol head, Mike. Tell us a little bit more.
There's always been a little bit of an element that the business is a little bit like Lotus. It was there to fund what I wanted to do in motor racing, and the classic problem with motor racing is that sometimes you have the time, sometimes you have the money. You rarely have the time and the money at the same time. However, as we got into the late 90s and the early 2000s, I finally was able to step up from club level motor racing to a more international stage, and enjoyed two class wins at the Le Mans 24 Hours and a number of series and championship wins since then as well.
Excellent. Well, many congratulations, and it's good to hear that that gives you that release away from the day-to-day activity within the business. Right. Let's get down to the serious stuff and start looking now about this issue that we're seeing more and more of in relation to fires in waste and recycling facilities. It's not many weeks that go by where we're not seeing somewhere in the UK that fire and rescue services are sending huge numbers of resources to deal with uncontrolled fires in waste and recycling facilities. And again, that is not just unique to the UK. We're seeing it across the world. What I want to look at with you, Mike, is how we can really start to control those fires and look at what FireVu are doing to make that happen. So, tell me what I, as a recycling provider, would be the options to me from FireVu.
I think the critical factor within all of these instances is the pace at which it develops, whether it's wood recycling in a power station or metal recycling. It still represents a fuel, and sometimes it's even being recycled to produce a fuel. So once a fire gets established, you've actually got a huge fuel stack that is then going to burn, and it's most critical that the detection is as early as possible. We've seen incidents whereby fires have got from a small outburst of flames, the size of a saucepan, to an uncontrollable blaze in as little as 10-15 minutes. So it is really vital that the detection is early and the initial response is there. Our detectors combine video, both in the visual spectrum and also looking very much in the very bright environment where the flames will be found, and also in the thermal spectrum as a combined unit that then gives you both early warning and very fast detection of a fire, such that then suppression systems can be triggered at the first possible moment and people can be notified, knowing that there is a critical incident they need to be responding to.
Very much so. That early intervention is key, and having that visual ability to see what is happening and put that early response in certainly gives you that vital edge on the minutes of getting in there and having the ability to extinguish the fire rather than just controlling the outer perimeters. Very often the whole area around the options and the requirements of the facility provider is difficult to understand because the legislation and guidance is so vague. Is that something that we're seeing here in this industry as well?
I think, again, we touched on the fact that the industry moves very slowly, but the circumstances are changing very, very rapidly. For example, although there was, we talk about major incidents that we see every few weeks. Last year, there was 1,200 fires of some form or another that were reported in waste recycling and related facilities. So on many sites, it's an almost daily occurrence that there's some form of minor trigger. And as a result, the requirements in terms of how they're monitored and how they're reacted to are changing probably faster than the regulations can keep up with. I think one of the classic issues is with regards to a basic fire protection plan. You have to show that you're able to extinguish a fire, say, within, I think the nominal time is 4 hours. And frankly, if you let it much more than multiples of 4 minutes, 10, 12 minutes, and that fire is now out of control, and it doesn't matter what your plan is, the site is going to burn to the ground, and all you're going to do is suppress and try and limit the damage.
Exactly that. And going back to my days when I was still in the service, it's that the whole issue of risking lives for savable lives, but not risking lives for property that is already gone. And when you look at like you say, the speed at which a fire of that size escalates, and the need to protect surrounding property becomes the focus, while just doing enough to keep the other under control. What must be hugely interesting, and one of the areas I would be looking at, is as a facilities provider, my insurance company must be looking very closely when they calculate my premium about what my control measures are in terms of dealing with this. Have you found that insurance companies are looking favorably on companies that are making the investment with products like FireVu?
I think it's a combination of looking favourably and, frankly, demanding that something is done to change the pattern of things that may already have happened. One of our earlier sites in London, they'd had 3 major incidents over 18 months that had resulted in site shutdowns on one occasion for a matter of weeks. And the level of damage, the insurance company was saying, enough is enough, we've got to do something about this, it can't keep on repeating. And since that installation in around, I think it's around 2015, they've had many incipient fires, but they've had no site shutdowns and no significant damage. And the insurance companies are certainly beginning to recognise that. One of the other sites we did about the same time related to a skip hire waste disposal type facility, and in fact it was the environmental damage that was as much a concern as anything. It was out in the countryside in Worcestershire, and the concern was that any runoff would run onto adjacent agricultural property and the such like. So they'd already invested in recycling cooling tanks to collect water. So in the event of a fire, any runoff water would be immediately captured in the tanks, potentially filtered, and be available to continue fighting the fire. But equally, they were concerned that, as we talked about, the fire shouldn't be allowed to get well established, such that it became a complete loss, and then the impact on the surrounding area through smoke, drifting pollution, because of course within the materials you've got no idea what's in there. There's plastics, all sorts of potentially carcinogenic material, and whilst there's the actual risk to life from the fire, there's also the environmental risk of the contamination that spreads as a result.
Exactly, and it's that area of environmental impact that in the old days was not a consideration, but today is a major factor in any fire commander's strategy, and also should feature in the damage limitation measures for the company itself. I can remember that just I think it was last year we lost a local authority recycling centre that the lorries would go to and drop off the recycling and waste from the household collections. That was a total loss, and the ongoing impact was that waste was piling up on the streets, which then in itself presented health hazards through vermin, rodents, and other such like. So the knock-on effect of the impact of closing one of these centres is very wide-reaching, and something that needs to be in that damage limitation plan. Major incidents are the ones that hit the news, but like you say, it's something that's happening on a daily basis. A lot of them are near misses. They're able to deal with them at the right time, but with the ongoing and rising issue of lithium-ion batteries, we're now entering a whole new stage of hazard and risk within these facilities. Tell us a little bit more about that, Mike.
Well, this is certainly a key factor we've seen over the last 12, 18 months. That figure of 1,200 fires last year was only 700 fires in 2022. So in a matter of a couple of years, we've seen an increase of 71%. And it isn't the fact that people are getting more careless; it's the fact that batteries are causing around 48% of all waste fires in the UK. Apparently, one of the statistics is that 1.6 billion batteries are thrown away in the last year. So that's 3,000 batteries a minute being thrown away, with also over 1 billion electrical items containing hidden lithium batteries in there as well. So no matter how good the recycling facilities are in terms of trying to trap and detect them, there are always going to be a certain number we'll get through in unexpected places. And it's that impact of, in particular, lithium batteries that don't just generate heat. They go with a hell of a pop and a bang and an immediate flame. That's what's the lighter that's then buried amidst the kindling of the rest of the waste material that very, very rapidly escalates into a critical fire.
Yeah, the lithium-ion batteries, when you look at how something has emerged onto the market so quickly, and the issues that it's creating, and one of the conversations I regularly have is that it's almost as though technology is outpaced the ability to respond. And I think that was very much the case in the early days of lithium-ion, especially with electric vehicles, where fire and rescue services didn't have the capability or the resources to deal with fires involving lithium-ion batteries. And to this day, we're still now seeing that the only way to successfully deal with a fire is to drag them into a container and fill the container up with water. But that will only hold the issue, because there's been so many examples now of draining out and the fire starting again. So it's this ongoing issue that we've got to start saying to ourselves, if we're bringing in new technology, but society's not got the ability to be able to cope with it at its end of life, then we've got to really start saying, should we be letting this take control? Because at the moment, when I get invited to speak at conferences and go and see events, it's certainly the hot topic. No pun intended, but we are there. So, is FireVu seeing an increased level of interest from the sector since lithium-ion batteries were introduced?
Certainly, and I think there's two very separate aspects to that. The most visible aspect is where we talk about large lithium-ion storage systems, so EV batteries, solar batteries, such like, and that's where you've got a substantial array, and you do have that problem that actually putting it out is very, very difficult. At best, you can just try and keep it cool until it burns itself out internally, which can be quite a big while with a 100, 200 kilowatt hour now battery packs in some of the bigger cars. At the other end of the scale, though, you've also got the impact of the very small batteries, the sort of laptop or even a sort of AA sized battery. And it's when that can perhaps be buried 5-10 foot deep inside a rubbish pile, and the weight of the rubbish on top of it causes it to fracture, even though it may have been relatively discharged for its purpose when it went into the rubbish pile. However, of course, being in a discarded piece of electrical equipment, it could be that the electrical item failed and it's got a perfectly charged battery inside it. But regardless of its state of charge, you will get a significant develop with minimal oxygen. So the fact that it's buried in the bottom of a pile of waste, even if there's the smallest amount of moisture there, you will still end up with oxygen being generated as well, potentially, which will help to sustain the fire. So one of the things we're seeing in waste facilities, fires that have been developing for perhaps half an hour buried below the surface. And that's where we combine the visual smoke detection with the visual flame detection once we can identify an actual breakout, but also with much more sophisticated than simple thresholds thermal detection, where we're looking for changes in patterns, we're looking for slowly rising temperatures, because in fact it could be that the fire is out of sight and developing, and someone needs to be doing something about it now, because again, by the time it breaks out at the surface, you've got a significant fire going on underneath the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And that, like you say, the ability to detect the heat with using the thermal imaging equipment is excellent. And when you look at the way that technology in thermal imaging has come on over the last 2 decades, it's amazing. I remember thermal imaging when I joined the fire service first. We had one thermal imaging camera in the whole organization, and it was almost the size of a dustbin, and it took 2 people to carry it. But now we're seeing them; they're so easy now, and you can even get one on your mobile phone. That leads me nicely. I enjoy Discovery Channel, how's it done type documentaries. Talk me through what a FireVu system looks like in terms of who sees it, where's it detected, how does the calls get made to the facility, so I can build up a picture of what's involved.
The main unit looks similar to a conventional closed-circuit TV video surveillance camera. It's actually got 2 sensors on the front. It's got the thermopile, which is providing the thermal imaging capability, and also a visual sensor. It's in a robust case, of course, because it's often in a very harsh environment, from there, we can connect directly to the fire loop through an interface module, such that the first primary line of signaling and the fail-safe signaling is always via the fire alarm panel. So we meet all the requirements for ensuring that the signaling always gets through. But then equally, it's connected as an IP system as well. So that allows both local and remote surveillance of the video pictures, the thermal imaging of the record of what's happened over the last 20 minutes, half an hour if there's been an incident building, and also all the latest generation communication techniques, both existing alarm central station reporting techniques, but also the sort of things that we now see with IoT devices, protocols such as MQTT, which form the backbone of things like your Alexa and everything else. So ultimately, through MQTT, you can be sat at home and your Alexa can say, "Hi, do you know that your building's about to burn down?"
Well, we shouldn't really laugh, but I think that Alexa tells me everything else about my life. Why shouldn't she then tell me about a disaster that's about to happen? But so, in terms of that early notification, if I'm sat at home as a site operator, manager, owner, and the system detects a build-up of heat, have I then got the ability to go in and look and see what the system's showing?
Absolutely, because it's an IP video-based solution. It's the same as your Ring doorbell. It can notify you. You can then go and look at it. You can go and look at what the scene looked like 10 minutes before. You have indicators on the scene, overlaid on the scene, showing you where it's seeing either thermal disturbance, smoke, detection, or outright flame detection. And if there's multiple detectors on the one site, you can switch from one to the other and perhaps get a different view, because frequently there can be more than one detector that will overlap with the same zone. There's a moderate distance limitation of about 30-35 meters typically for the most applications, but it may well be that because you're then covering a whole site, there'll be a second detector that may be outside its nominal range, maybe at 40 or 50 meters, but it will still give a very good perspective on the detector that has actually initially triggered. And in fact, we frequently do see triggers way beyond the quoted range, because it's very much proportionate to the size of the fire. So certainly, as soon as a fire gets established, any detectors in the field of view will start responding and giving extra information. So this information can be to you on your mobile phone, or it can be to a remote alarm receiving center, or it can be to the control room of a given organization. And equally, of course, many of the sites now are working much more on a 24/7 basis, so they may not be as busy during the night, but there are personnel there at night. And whilst there may be an initial response with the deluge or a water cannon, a fire monitor type solution, if the personnel on site can then also be notified, they can undertake additional activities. You talked about putting large lithium storage batteries into containers full of water. Some of our clients that are dealing with day-to-day waste and metal recycling have discovered that, in fact, their best solution is to catch it as early as possible whilst it's a little bit bigger than the sort of fire that maybe you'd even just apply a size 12 boot to. But if it's growing in the edge of a pile, getting in there with an excavator and pulling that section of the pile out into the middle of the yard, spreading it out, such that now you're no longer feeding the rest of the pile, and you've actually separated that part, seems to in fact be one of the most successful strategies. And again, for that to be safe, you've got to catch it in the very earliest stages. You don't want to be doing that when the flames are 5 and 10 foot high, unless you're particularly brave and taken all your extra brave pills that day.
Yeah, exactly, and the ability, and that's one of the very basic fire service strategies. If you've got the ability to get in there early and put a fire break in and move the affected area to one side, that's how to get on top of it very quickly. The insurance companies must be seeing huge claims coming from this sort of fire, and like you say, the ability that FireVu gives in terms of that early indication, the early heads up, the ability to potentially have it in with a 24-hour monitoring company with a number of milestones in terms of trigger points of when they press the button to bring the local authority fire service in, must be hugely reassuring to both operator and insurer, who may potentially have to put their hands into very deep pockets to get a lot of money out when something goes wrong. from a fire safety perspective as well, we should also remember that these facilities have also got a duty on them in terms of protection and prevention with their risk assessments and showing how they do demonstrate due diligence in terms of known risks. So having something like this, almost like invisible cloak of FireVu around you when you're putting together that strategy, must be hugely reassuring, and it would certainly make me feel a lot more content. So we've talked about what FireVu does, how it can then work alongside the existing control measures, and let's not forget, we also there's that requirement for good housekeeping. It FireVu can detect when something goes wrong, but a lot of time the something goes wrong bit can be managed out with good housekeeping. So it's that complete package. You're not going to bring in one miracle to overcome all your responsibilities. So, Mike, where does FireVu go from here? We've got a first rate product that does exactly what it says on the tin, using the highest technology available. Where do you see the next stage going in terms of the next 10 years for FireVu?
I think it will be scale and scope. The key markets to date have been the large voluminous areas, so areas like aircraft hangars, hotel atriums where there's very large atriums, so there's no conventional detector is going to be effective in that area. And of course, we've been talking today about the waste processing facilities and the rising needs from those as a result of, in particular, the rise in lithium batteries is certainly keeping us very, very busy at the moment. Of course, we also have the other areas that have been much more of a challenge. When we had the Grenfell fire, that has been a somewhat difficult challenge for us, in the fact that we're absolutely convinced, and we did tests with Sussex Fire Authority, went on deploying FireVu on the outside of a tower. But unfortunately, at that point, it was the political problems that started to interfere, and also the risk of being involved in anything to do with a future Grenfell-like fire. And in fact, although we could demonstrate that there's a perfectly viable solution with every 4 or 5 floors a ring of FireVu detectors covering 4 or 5 floors from each corner of even substantial sized high-rise buildings, the problem was that if there was anything relating whatsoever to cladding or whatever that was causing a concern, even as an interim solution, there wasn't a design authority in the country that was willing to sign off a method of attaching it to the building, because the last thing they wanted to do was to be involved in piercing that cladding and having altered the characteristics of that cladding, and then the risk to their professional indemnity insurance of being the last person that touched it. So, although it was a technologically viable solution, it's not one that has been able to be deployed. And to that extent, we are exploring whether or not a much simpler, very much flame-oriented, flame breakout-oriented baby version of FireVu that can potentially be deployed on high-rise buildings, because we've got so many people now in negative equity in unsaleable flats. They don't want to be living there because of the risks. They can't sell it because of the ongoing situation. And I suspect people will still be reticent about high-rise buildings even after any particular concerns on cladding on those specific buildings have been addressed. As a solution on the outside of a high-rise building, each unit could potentially detect as much as 5 or 6 floors below the current floor, and at the end of the day, it's a fire below you coming up and trapping you that is the biggest concern. And as soon as there's a sufficient population of them, you will quickly get to the stage that there is a complete coverage of each face of the building, and every user that has one would get a cross alert if any other detector triggered, and it would be again that vital early warning. The moment a fire reaches the stage that it's a breakout, in other words, the flames have come out through a window, a vent, a balcony, or whatever, you would get an immediate response across the whole building that a breakout had occurred. And again, people can then look at evacuating long before the critical problem of being trapped on the upper floors has become unmanageable.
Yeah, exactly, and it's crazy the fact that we've got so many potential solutions to these issues, but people are afraid to discuss it because of fear of litigation. And let's not forget that Grenfell, the whole issue in respect to Grenfell was down to the inability for somebody to do their job properly and deal with the situation. The flats were designed to contain the fire. If the flat had been refurbished and there hadn't have been that piece of wood put in underneath the window where the window wasn't fitting properly, then the fire would have been contained. But we're seeing this all over the world. But what's interesting is you look at the number of fires they have in high-rise buildings in Dubai, for example, where we see flames licking up the outside of buildings, but it never penetrates the inside of the building. So yes, they've had some pretty impressive fires, but there's not been a loss of life. And this is where there's that big difference. But we've got to start saying and wrapping the table to say this negative equity thing's got to be dealt with because people's lives are being affected massively because of the political inability to grasp it and deal with the issue that we now know that there are well-established solutions for. But when we run for government, Mike, we'll make sure that we change all that.
Whilst I don't mind sticking my neck out and advising on potential solutions to problems such as Grenfell, I think I would draw the line at putting myself quite that deep in the firing line. Although I think many of the people that are there at the moment possibly deserve to be, but that's their issue.
Yeah, it certainly is, and before long, I think the industry has got to grasp the nettle and say if it's not been dealt with at the levels it should, then we should be exposing the solutions to the wider public, so they've got the ability to make decisions and then put pressure. With the knowledge and understanding behind them, they can then start putting pressure to say there are solutions that will get us out of this problem. And you look at the millions and millions of pounds that are still being spent on a daily basis for Firewatch. People that are sat in buildings 24 hours a day just waiting for a fire to start. You start adding all that up and looking at the cost of a long-term solution using innovation such as FireVu. It's not going to be long before they work out that the sums add up in favour of the technology.
Certainly, and I think the Firewatch solution, again, the longer it goes on, the more likely it is that there will be an incident missed, because it's like everything. If you're looking for an infrequent event long enough, the attention has got to dwindle, and it's these long-term factors that I think are critical. You touched on the fact that the Dubai buildings are coping well. Part of that is the fact that, of course, they're all very, very new. The problems that we have in a lot of our existing buildings, and that is inevitable as buildings get older. You talked about the modification of a piece of wood being put in to fill a gap. There's many, many things that happen that affect an existing building. In residential, people say, great, look at how I've installed my wonderful TV. It's now set in the wall. And they've just completely compromised the fire break between that flat and the flat next door. new piping's put in and the fire stopping isn't necessarily as good, or old fire stopping that was made of foam 20 odd years ago is now broken down, been eaten by rodents or whatever, and is broken down. So it's the fact that it's ever changing. So whilst you can design to best practice to minimize the risk, there will always be the problem that however good it starts, the one thing you can be sure of is that it will deteriorate with age and the problem will start to develop. So I think detection will always be a critical part of the armoury in protecting ourselves against such fires. A similar environment is where people are working with hot works as well, which is something that we've been looking at with FM, Factory Mutual in the US. They pay out billions of pounds in the commercial sector because of hot works fires. And we've just seen the reopening of the Notre Dame after 5 years. It was interesting that there was work going on up in the roof at the time that the fire started up there, and it's been suggested it could be a cigarette. I'm sure they're probably also working with an awful lot of things related to leading and felt and tar that they would be dealing with up there. And again, the chances that after hot works it may well be that all the correct assessments were done and everything was checked before it was left, but unseen behind the scenes, behind the other side of where the work was being done, something could be smouldering long after the personnel have left. And it's the fact of hot works potentially needing, again, another application we'll look at is rapid deployment and mobile units, such that whenever you're performing hot works, you leave something behind for perhaps 8-12 hours afterwards, such as if that hot work has left a latent problem, it will get detected long before it turns into a major issue. And again, it's another exciting area that we're looking into in the future.
Yeah, that would make perfect sense. I was just racking my brains there when you were talking. I think looking back at my time, I cannot remember going to a fire in a building that other than maybe a electrical fault that just started. So there was usually some form of maintenance or construction going on that had not had sufficient control measures put in to ensure that there, like you say, the conducted heat wasn't going through to the other side of the compartment. But like you say, hugely exciting if you're going under major construction and you can call FireVu and say, we'd like 6 or 8 units to just give us that peace of mind while we're working, especially on some of these heritage buildings. It would be a real safety net, knowing that you can walk away with confidence, knowing that you're going to get an early indication if something goes wrong. Mike, it's been a pleasure for me to sit here and have the ability to ask you questions without being interrupted by other people in the audience, where you normally don't get to have an expert all to yourself. Really appreciate your time, my friend. I can certainly now understand the full benefits of what a FireVu system can bring, and also the potential for the future going forward. And if listeners are thinking, wow, this is something new for us, please go to www.firevu.com and look at all the plethora of information that can be drawn from the website. And if you want to know more, then pick the telephone up and call the number on the site. And you never know, you might be speaking to Mike Newton yourself. And whether he gives you so much time as he's given me will be to be seen. But I'm sure, knowing the professional that Mike is, he will give you as much time as is needed to sort your solution out. My name's Duncan White. I'm the managing editor of the International Fire and Safety Journal, and I've had the privilege of speaking to Mike Newton from FireVu. Thank you.
Thank you very much.